Do you think that as a culture, we are continuing to become more and more polarized in our views?
I mean, it looks that way, right? But
is it productive?
Yeah. Well, it's definitely not productive. And you can tell just by, I mean, I'm living in Nashville, right? And Nashville is pretty conservative, talking to people, and they're pretty conservative. So you have people and they're like, oh yeah, if, some of those COVID bills or like liberals come over here, like we have our guns. Like,
oh, I was just going to say they have guns and they hunt.
Yeah, exactly. And then you go to, areas in California and they're like, oh, like rednecks with guns. Like there's they don't have any brains. They don't know what they're talking about. They just follow fake news. Right. And I don't know how those type of people can get along. Yeah.
I just think it's getting worse. I think the polarization is getting worse, and it gets harder and harder for people to hear each other and be open-minded. And I think a remedy is being able to have that conversation. But I think it's fascinating. I think we're just like cultures in this place that's seemingly not getting better. It's getting worse, at least from, polarized perspectives and division. It's like, divide and conquer takes on a new meaning. Like you'd think, I used to think divide and conquer was all about, divide up the work and we all get more done. But divide and conquer is far more about like when people can't agree, you actually suppress the whole thing and then someone else can be in charge.
Do you think things were getting better before COVID? Not that it matters now, but
yeah, I don't think so. I think that it's probably been I think it's steady. I don't think it was better before COVID. It was better than before COVID. But I think that also sometimes what ends up having to happen is there has to be like such a huge swing another direction to kind of get people to take stock and have a look at everything. And, when something is so in your face, you end up having to finally look at it and make a decision for yourself. And so I think that, and I personally think that we're being asked to look within and use our own inner guidance and our own emotional body as more of an indicator of truth versus, the media outlet or the newspaper or the television program or anything like that, because we're just having a hard time struggling. We're struggling with what's real and what's not. So, but I don't think it was better.
I agree with what you said. I think
it wasn't getting better.
Yeah. Okay. From my point of view for that, at least in Canada, it looked like and that could have been because of my dad and all the controversy that happened with him in like 2016, 2017. But I thought like 2018, 2019, I thought things were kind of calming down. Like I thought we were hearing about fewer problems, but then COVID skyrocketed everything.
I think every 4 years we get a problem, every 4 years we get the great divider, right? Like the color divider. And, people like TV gets obnoxious and there's ads on TV all day about your local government or your, or national government with the president. And, Biden was a divider and Trump was a divider and, like seemingly more than normal.
Yeah. I think your point too about having to look within kind of for guidance is a smart point, because I think people underestimate the value of intuition, right? And I had a hard time wrapping my mind around intuition because I always thought about things like logically, whatever that means, right? Whatever I could actually factually see and then kind of balancing that out in my head. And then even though I had this gut instinct most of the time where it was like, okay, logically this makes sense, but my gut's like pulling me in the other direction real hard. So what's going on there? And I think what happens is people are really good at recognizing patterns that they can't put into words. And so if you get this feeling where you're like, no, something's off, it's because you've identified a whole bunch of patterns out there and you haven't figured it out enough, I guess, to put it into words. So I'd say intuition is definitely, I at least undervalued it. And now that I've been kind of going more off, no, I feel like I'm sure this is right in my body. And I don't know if women are better at that than men, or if people just I think I stuffed it down and ignored it for a long time without valuing it. But my life's definitely been going better since I started being like, no, my gut's saying do this. I'll just go for it.
That's good. What are some experiences where you look back and think, if I would have listened to this would have been different?
Relationships mostly, I think.
Yeah.
Being like, I can't think about it. It doesn't make sense in my head, but it doesn't feel good. And I guess relationships are an easy thing to point out because that's where you get a lot of that instinct. But I'd say probably relationships, and then some business opportunities that I thought were a bad idea that I was like, but kind of maybe more pushed into because there was no law. I couldn't come up with an explanation about why it was a bad idea. Right. I'm like, this just doesn't feel right, which is not a good argument. If you're trying to make your argument, it's my intuition. It's just not a good argument.
Especially if you're talking to a man, they're like,
yeah.
Did you see the numbers?
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm generalizing. Like, I always feel like, obviously I had a very long conversation about polarizing. So I'm using generalities here, but men tend to be a little bit more analytical, a little bit more by the numbers, a little bit more headspace instead of body. And yeah, I'm sure talking to a guy and saying, I don't know, dude, just doesn't feel right. I can't do this. Let's pull out. That doesn't go over well. Yeah.
And I think the fact that, generally speaking, men are, well, at least known for being better, thinking about things in numbers like that. I think that's part of the reason I kind of dampened down my feelings as well, growing up and probably in my 20s, which was, my entire life. So I'd say early 20s, but I probably, whenever I had this feeling, I was like, well, if I can't put it into words, it doesn't matter. And it took me until I think I was 28, maybe 27 or 28 before I was like, you know what, that does matter. And maybe focusing on it will actually improve my life, because maybe it wasn't until I thought maybe I was picking up on patterns that I recognized, but couldn't put into words. And that's what intuition is. I don't even know if that's right or not, but yeah, I think the fact that numbers and thinking about things logically is more associated with men made me dampen down that kind of part of me.
Yeah, I think patterns or frequency. I think of a lot of things in terms of frequency. The old Nikola Tesla famous quote, if you want to know the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, vibration, and frequency.
Yeah, I've seen that. Okay. Tell me what that means.
Just that everything is an energy. Like, we are an energy. Everything has an energy. And so, and then understanding in quantum physics, we're not dealing with the things that can be seen, and that everything is connected, and quantum entanglement is the word for that. And that we can really feel things, even though you can't see the connection. There's threads connecting, there's energetic connections, and that we're energy. And so we're kind of creating wave patterns, and these wave patterns interact with each other, being other people. And so we're getting feedback on our surrounding, on what we're dealing with. We're getting feedback on that. And I think that can happen at a distance or right next to each other. Because it's energetic, and it's all that quantum physics stuff that I'm fascinated with, but definitely don't understand well enough. But yeah, I think you're right. You're picking up on patterns, but because the pattern could be a pattern of frequency.
Okay. I like that. I like that a lot. I don't understand that either, but there's definitely something to that, because it happens when you have conversations with people too, right? You can have a conversation with something and something's just off. You're like, this is off, and nothing seems to be going wrong, but something is not good here. Right. Yeah. And then you can have a conversation with someone or be near someone where it's like, this is comfortable. Mm-hmm. And I always was like, maybe it's like smell, or I don't know what it is exactly, but it's weird.
Where do you feel like you pick up more of your nature, your inherent nature? We talked a little bit about parents, but like, they're kind of the foundation for all of our good and all of our bad, and all of our own patterns. Are you more, I'm guessing you're more like your dad, because, from what I understand about your mom and my watching things and listening, is that she's pretty into the spiritual, intuitive realm. And so, being analytical is not necessarily her nature. So, and you strike me as someone that's a little bit more analytical.
Yeah, I'd say probably, I think maybe the older I get, the more I recognize parts of my mom in me, but that's I'd say, yeah, it is cool. It is cool. But I'd say probably like 70% dad. Like, part of the reason I've been running his business is because when something's off, I can look at something and say, this is not going to be okay with him. Right. This is not going to be okay with him. And it's spot on all the time. And it's anything from, business deals to thumbnails or to how something's written. Right. Where I'm like, that's off and he's going to pick up on that, or that doesn't sound right. And that's going to bug him. It's mostly that, like, that's going to bug him.